Ketter, one Jeskai Black. He's on your left. Aaron Eastwood with Green Red Eldrazi. He is on your right. Kent Ketter, a member of Team Lotus with Chris Anderson, Jacob Baugh, Andrew Tenjum, and a bevy of other players. You can also expect the Kent Ketter deck tech later today as well, as we are underway here. Now tell me a little bit about this Green Red Eldrazi deck.
Well, we got some new additions here. We got Thought-Knot Seer and Kozilek, the Great Distortion. A lot of the ramp spells, not as heavy on the new Eldrazi as you might anticipate, but 2 copies of Kozilek's Return, 2 copies of Chandra Flamecaller also is a nice mid-range play. Can be a sweeper, can also be pressure.
Now, Ketter started things off with a Sunken Hollow, and now he's going to search up a basic plains with that Windswept Heath, so perhaps we have a Jace on the way. Yeah, it looks like we do. So while this Jeskai Black build that Ketter is playing, it's very burn heavy, but it's got to still have Jace. I mean, you have to recast the burn spells.
Yes, a great card with high impact cards to flashback. A card that I'm critical of often in Green Red Eldrazi decks is the Game 1 Jotty Offshoot. I don't think it's enough to move the dial here, although Eastwood doesn't have a copy. But against Ketter's build, which is a lot more burn focused, picking up 2 or 3 points of life, a lot more effective than I think it is against some of the Atarka's Command, Become Immense Team, or Battle Rage beatdown strategies.
Ketter going to draw and discard here with his Jace. So just 1 card in the graveyard. It's number 2 on the way. Though Kent does have to figure out what he wants to discard here. Now, a card that's very, very good against this Green Red Eldrazi ramp deck is Mantis Rider. That's a place you want to be.
Especially with them moving towards Kozilek's Return as a sweeper of choice instead of Radiant Flames.
Ketter now going to sacrifice a Bloodstained Mire. You saw the discard there was a Polluted Delta. He's going to dig up a land out of his deck, perhaps a basic mountain on the way. There is a basic mountain. Ketter, someone that we did see in the Players' Championship in 2014. A heck of a year for him then. Had to take last year mostly off because of school, but we're going to see him quite a bit this year, and we're going to see him cast a Mantis Rider and come in for 3. Eastwood's going to fall down to 17. We're going to move Aaron's way. Now, one thing about Green Red Eldrazi, and this is just kind of thoughts on the format as well, the ramp is just not particularly good.
No, I mean, now if you want to, you have access if you want to play with waste to get a rampant growth, but you get 3 and 4 mana, pieces of mana acceleration, not nearly the same thing as rampant growth.
Yeah, the ramp waste spell, Ruin in their wake, it does contort the way you have to build your deck, that's for sure.
And Eastwood here is not playing with that card, so.
Ketter going to search up a Smoldering Marsh. He'll enter the battlefield untapped, given the basic plains and basic mountain on the battlefield. See what comes next here for Kent. You see he does have a Jeskai Charm in hand. He will activate Jace. It'll be flipping here in just a moment as there are 4 cards in the graveyard, and this looks to be card number 5 on the way. Going to discard an extra Jace, and there's the transformation. So the Telepath Unbound is here. It'll start on 5. And you can see at least 2 4-damage spells in Kent's hand already in Exquisite Firecraft and Jeskai Charm.
I like a lot of what's going on in Ketter's list. I wonder if Crackling Doom is just so good that you have to play the 4th color, or if you could move into just a Jeskai shell.
Now there are some black cards in the sideboard too. We'll get to those when we do get to the sideboarding. But I am curious as well, as there's a Storm Chaser Mage, and it's an attack for 4/5 because of Wild Slash's prowess, and then you count those 2 points of damage as well. And this game could be over the very next turn.
This story that you see right here is pretty common of Green Red Eldrazi Game 1 against an aggressive strategy. Not doing anything for the first couple turns and just getting beaten down.
Explosive Vegetation is a spell that's being played right now, and Ketter is showing that I have a Jeskai Charm, I can recast Wild Slash, and I can get you dead right now. I'm not going to waste your time letting you dig up those lands with Explosive Vegetation. So Kent Ketter is going to win game number 1 here over Aaron Eastwood. This Jeskai Black build, very burn heavy, up a game very quickly over Green Red Eldrazi, and you said it, against an aggressive deck like this, that's how it's going to play out a lot of the time.
Yeah, this deck without something like Jotty Offshoot in the opening hand just does not gain life or defend itself well enough against these decks that are capable of killing on turn 4 or 5 pretty easily if they're uncontested.
Well, let's take a look at the sideboards here. We'll start with Aaron Eastwood and his 4 Hangerback Walkers, 2 Kozilek Return, 2 copies of Whisperwood Elemental, and 2 Thought-Knot Seers, 2 World Breakers as well, along with an Ugin, and this is Renewal, and a Void Winnower.
So I guess the World Breaker is fine for this matchup because of reach. It still seems so slow to me. I don't know. 4 copies of Hangerback Walker to get some blocking going on here. There's not a whole lot here in Eastwood's sideboard that's striking me as being great for the matchup. I guess he can bring in the other copies of Kozilek's Return if he expects, there to be Soulfire, Grandmaster, Seeker of the Way type threats on top of Jace. Ketter's list is actually light on that kind of stuff, so maybe it's just the World Breakers that are coming in here.
On the other side of things here for Kent, he's got 4 Soulfire Grandmasters, some black cards here, and 4 Self-Inflicted Wound and Read the Bones, 3 Kozilek Return, and then 3 Hallowed Moonlight.
I would bring in Read the Bones. Call it a day.
Just 1 card?
Well, the Wild Slashes are not great here. Maybe you just bring in a couple copies of Soulfire Grandmaster. Slightly better, but I would be sideboarding very light here.
I think he's got a very positive matchup.
A lot of burn and a lot of haste, a lot of flying. And what's nice about that is it means that there isn't one dimension you can beat Ketter on. 1 copy of a Fog or a Feed the Clans is not going to be able to beat him if he's got Manus Rider going, and just playing Ugin and wiping the board is also not going to be good enough because he has so many copies of Jeskai Charm and Exquisite Firecraft.
Well, Kent's going to take a moment to step away from the table and get ready for game number 2. Perfect time to talk about regionals, which is going to be here in just a couple of weeks. Go to StarCityGames.com/regionals for more information. You see our beautiful playmat here. And now the details to talk about. Well, February 6th is the date, and here's what's going to happen with the playmat.
Yeah, it's exclusive and free, along with this token, to the first 200 people to register for their regional championships. And we've announced all the venues for that as well.
We have. Now, worth noting, of course, is that for regionals, it's one of the few places that you can get SCG points for the SCG Tour. So you see the cash, the SCG points, and the qualifications involved for invitationals on the screen. Now, again, worth noting, only places to get SCG points. Regionals, Opens, Classics, Invitationals. That's it. So this is a tournament where if you're not qualified for Pro Tour or through the Gatewatch or other Pro Tours that are taking place, and you care about qualifying for the Players' Championship or one of our Invitationals, this is the place you got to go.
Absolutely. And again, we have all the venues announced here. It's February 6th all around the country. You can find the regional championship closest to you. Always get more information at go.StarCityGames.com/regionals.
Game number 2 about to be underway. Kent Ketter is back at the table, just about ready. We learn more about him. Again, do remember, we saw him at the Players' Championship, our first one back in 2014. 27 years old from Bloomington, Indiana, 4 open top 8s. And it's funny because you see no invitational top 8s. That's because we don't count 9th, obviously, as a top 8, which he has 2 of.
Yeah.
He's very good at getting 9th place in tournaments. He got 9th place in a Grand Prix last year. He calls himself, as do his friends, Kent Can't Close Ketter, because he also got 2nd place in a lot of tournaments as well. But he's a military veteran with a deployment in Iraq in 2008. First ever F&M deck contained. I actually didn't know that.
It's pretty powerful.
7 suicide nods.
That's, I mean, give Ketter credit. He did correctly identify a powerful card. If you could play with as many see-the-side nods as you want, at least 7 is probably correct.
And apparently enjoys mustard on his frozen pizza, which is a different conversation altogether. I don't know what the deal is with that.
Back in the day, we had a kid who played at my local store, don't want to mention his name, and he cheated. We drafted, and he would add cards to his draft deck.
Okay.
Except this was during Invasion, and he added the Dejins. So many, like Ruham and Sulam Dejin, which first of all are 6 mana apiece. So there's really only so many that you can put in your deck to begin with. And second are really bad. So we're eventually, like, first of all, we know you're cheating. And second, if you're going to cheat, why are you adding 4 Sulam Dejins to your deck? He went 1-3 at every F&M just cheating. So at least Ketter, again, to his credit, correctly identified a card you want to play a lot of copies of.
We're not going to name names.
Yeah, but a lot of my old target people who are listening to this, you know who I'm talking about. You remember 4 Sulan Dejin guy for sure.
Storm Chaser Mage going to come into the red zone here. Johnny Offshoot's going to gain a little bit of life as it looks like Eastwood's got some more interaction this game. And now, well, it looks like that might be a Nissa's Pilgrimage that he's casting. So going to dig up some forest. This is a much better draw.
Yeah.
Looks like Sylvan Advocate as well.
A little bit of defense here with the Johnny Offshoot. Acceleration early on in the game. He's on the play to boot. Much better start here.
And some life gain, too, from the Offshoot. So this looks much different than game number 1, that's for sure, where Eastwood did nothing, and then he died.
We know that there aren't that many Sulam Dejins in the draft.
Ketter going to take his 3rd turn in the game.
Boom.
6 mana, 6/6, trample. So then Dejin gets -2/-2 as long as green is the most common color. among all permanents?
So there's multiple ways that you can understand that having a lot of these in your deck is a bad thing. First of all, it's 6 mana. Second, you start having multiple Sulam Legions in play. And they're 4/4 tramplers for 6. And even for the bad standards of creatures back in the day, that was a bad deal.
That's just...
Ruham Djinn was up there.
That's just sad. That's just a sad story.
The Blue Djinn, I think Xanam Djinn, that card was actually really good. The rest of them were pretty crappy. Ruham!
Look at that! Look at that sword.
He's a 3/3 first striker for 6, assuming you have several of them in play.
And the Exquisite Firecraft looks like it's about to be cast here by Kent. Looks like he might be going upstairs with that Trigger Prowess now coming across for 2 as opposed to 1.
And this is the benefit of Jati Offshoot. Like I said, I don't think it really does a whole lot in the Atarka Red matchup. It's good when you're backing it up with Radiant Flames or other sweepers. But against Ketter's build here, which is a lot more burn-oriented, he's trying to get you low and finish you off. 1 point here, 1 point there, it adds up.
Well, Eastwood going to gain a little bit of life here. Just going to pass the turn back, so we head back over to Ketter. And he's picked up a copy of Goblin Dark Dwellers, though he is not quite there yet. He's going to start by sacrificing a Polluted Delta, down to 14. And there's a Prairie Stream. That'll get to enter the battlefield untapped, given the 2 basics. First, just an attack for 1. Next up is a Jeskai Charm. Well, that means it's going to be an attack for 2.
Huh.
It's going to be an attack for more than 2, because now here's a Wild Slash.
Really impressive to see Ketter just stick with the burn plan in the face of this Jati Offshoot. Not an easy way to do it.
Well, he thinks he can burn him down, and this might be actually reasonable.
Well, also, just what else does his cards do? I mean, this is kind of where he's at. May not be enough, but there's no plan B, so.
Now for Eastwood, you see 2 forests. There's a Battleland that's going to end the battlefield untapped, it appears. It's one of those expeditions that's hard to see, unfortunately.
Fortunately, the only one to Cinderglade, so we can easily ID that one.
Perfect. Sylvan Advocate is going to come across here for some damage. Ketter going to go back his way. There's land number 5. It's a swamp. Here's Goblin Dark Dwellers, I believe. And this is its debut. This is going to allow Ketter to recast. Looks like an Exquisite Firecraft going upstairs. Now here's an attack for 2, so it's going to be 6 total. And he doesn't even have a copy of Treasure Cruise in hand. Eastwood will draw.
But even if he's short right now, he's drawing very live.
Eastwood will gain a life from the offshoot. He's up to 4. And now all he can do after attacking, he might have a big spell to play. You have to imagine this deck does. That's a big spell. There's an Ugin. I just clear everything up now.
Although then he's down the offshoot and at 4 against a deck that can do 4 pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Ugin. Gonna go up, gonna go down. All right, it's gonna go down. Gonna clean everything up.
I mean, there's an argument there that he could have just bolted the
Storm Chaser Mage?
Yeah, because he can double block. I guess that play is just way too risky for very little upside, but I feel a little bad about losing the Jati Offshoot, because if you can get out next turn going from 4 to 5, that's a pretty big cushion.
Well, Ketter going to sacrifice Polluted Delta. His draw for the turn was a Read the Bones. You mentioned you wanted to bring that card in, and he certainly has.
It's really the only sideboard card that struck me as an easy card to include. Now he's got to figure out how to tap his lands in such a way to be able to cast any burn spell he conceivably draws off the top.
He also has to decide if he wants to fetch with Polluted Delta first or cast Read the Bones first. I think that's also going through the mind right now. There's the Polluted Delta. He'll sacrifice that. He's down to 5.
Yep, and Ugin's in play. I mean, he's got to finish this one out pretty soon. Actually, I think that sacrificing the fetch land first is pretty rough here, because he goes from 6 to 5. Read the Bones puts him to 3. Now he has to win the game, or he just dies to Ugin.
Sure, that's very, very true. Now, he could Treasure Cruise instead.
Yes, if he's going to Treasure Cruise anyway and just wants to do it for as cheap as possible, that's totally fine. But if his plan was Read the Bones, then I would have just not sacked the Polluted Delta.
3 cards coming. Is there a 4 damage spell? Doesn't look like there is just yet here for Ketter. Remember, he's got plenty of them. And if he can leave any of them in the graveyard, he would want to. You know, he's already played a land for the turn, so the Evolving Wilds isn't going to do anything. He's just going to pass the turn back. Yeah, he picked up quite a few lands there. And there is a Goblin Dark Dwellers in hand. Now, I don't have a great look at the graveyard. I think he may have had to delve it all away and wasn't able to leave a 4-damage spell down there.
Yeah, I wonder if there was a way for him to leave a 4-damage spell there and tap one more mana for the Treasure Cruise. So if he got it out of this turn, he would be able to Dark Dwellers. Because there was a Jeskai Charm down there. He didn't lose all of his 4-damage spells.
Okay, well, here's a bunch of mana. What's this going to be? I think that's Endbringer, I believe. Worldbreaker, excuse me.
Yeah, now he's protected from a Mana Strider off the top.
Okay. There goes Prairie Stream.
Oh, now Jeskai Charm's not out either. He has no white mana.
Exquisite Firecraft is EU. That's a Cinderglade. You might be playing a third game here.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, there's so many implications for the way that Ketter taps his mana and all that. I wonder if he's supposed to leave the Jeskai Charm in his sideboard, so if he gets the next turn, at least Dark Dwellers is a draw.
Well, either way, Aaron Eastwood's going to win again number 2 over Ketter. Green Red Eldrazi, Jeskai Black getting ready for game number 3. Interesting decks here being brought to the table on both sides. For Ketter, his deck's so much more burn heavy than other Jeskai Black decks. Than for Eastwood, his build of this Eldrazi deck just much different than others that we've ever seen.
I'm surprised by 2 copies of Worldbreaker because I think the deck struggles sometimes. Doesn't have a lot of mid-range plays. And some of its mid-range plays don't necessarily sweep up every situation. You can play Ugin and die a pretty good percentage of the time. And some of the, Dragon Lord of Tarka doesn't do anything in a lot of matchups. It's really hard for Worldbreaker to be dead. It's always going to be a removal spell. It's easy to cast, as a mid-range play relative to this deck standards. Has reach. It's good against haste threats. It's good against stuff on the table. It feels like a card that fits in here pretty naturally. Surprised to really only see 2 copies in the board throughout Eastwood 75.
Well, we'll see if another one of those comes to play in the next game. Ketter going to be on the play, though. A world of difference in this type of matchup. But as these players do shuffle up and get ready to take a look at their opening hands, the StarCityGames.com newsletter is what we're going to talk about right now. It is your source for Magic the Gathering news, and it's free to sign up for.
Yeah, all the best information about the going-ons at Star City Game, including information on the SCG Tour with an SCG Tour Match of the Week, exclusive deck lists, and advice from many of Star City Game's most popular columnists, and a free Cardboard Crack comic. Best of all, signing up is free over at go.starcitygames.com/newsletter.
Game number 3 about to be underway here between Kent Ketter and Aaron Eastwood. Jeskai Black, Green Red Eldrazi. They've gotten some new weapons, some different builds, and Oath of the Gatewatch certainly having an effect on this tournament. Very powerful set is Oath of the Gatewatch, and it's given us a lot of Eldrazi, some of which Eastwood is playing here this weekend, as we saw Worldbreaker show up there and make a difference. Ketter going to take a long look at his opening hand here. Again, I do think this matchup is pretty favorable for Ketter, but we saw that Eastwood was able to fight back with a much better draw in game 2.
Jotty Offshoot gave him the life he needed to get to his big plays. And I would not be surprised if that recipe happened again if Eastwood is able to find a Jotty Offshoot early on in the game.
And there is a Jotty Offshoot. Evolving Wilds here for Ketter. That was his land to start. He'll sacrifice that. Going to figure out what land he wants to go get. Now keep in mind, Mantis Rider in hand for Kent. That's a big threat in this matchup. Looks like Kent, well, he wants a check. You don't want to get it wrong in this format where it's so important that your battle lands into the battlefield untapped and that your mana works so that you can cast all of your spells.
And the world could be a lot more hospitable to 3 toughness creatures if people are playing with Kozilek's Return and cutting cards like Radiant Flames. Could be very good for threats like Mantis Rider.
There's a Bloodstained Mire. Well, we thought.
Ketter doesn't even have a spell to cast this turn. This is just trying to figure out how to sequence his lands.
And there's a Polluted Delta instead. And that'll be his land for the turn. Now we head back Eastwood's way.
I think he wants to go get play the Polluted Delta so he can go get an island, so then his Prairie Stream comes into play untapped next turn, and then he's got the mana for Mantis Rider.
There's a Sylvan Advocate, and now just a passing of the turn. Ketter.
Or maybe it's something else, because who knows?
Yeah.
Very complicated to play with these lands.
It is pretty difficult. He's deciding if he wants to sacrifice the Delta now or not. And it looks like he's going to. So, Is it time for a basic island? He said this is one of the toughest parts of his deck, is just making sure he knows what lands he's going to go get. He's going to go and search up a Sunken Hollow instead. And I suppose Windswept Heath can search up the basic plains to still allow him to cast Mantis Rider.
I think that all roads lead to the same place. It's just, where does he want to have double color of certain colors to be able to play 2 spells in 1 turn, that sort of stuff. There's no question about whether or not he's going to be able to cast the Mantis Rider. It's implications 2 or 3 turns down the road.
Well, here's a 3/3 haste flyer. In for 3 comes Ketter. Eastwood going to fall down to 18. The race is certainly on. Eastwood will draw. Does he have a ramp spell to go on for turn number 3? That's the question. Map the Waste. This is Pilgrimage. Any of them will do. There's a trigger. And now there is Nissa's Pilgrimage. So the answer is yes. Time to search up a couple of forests here for Aaron. There's forest number 1. That'll gain a life. And now there's the forest. That'll go to the grip. Let's go back to Kent Ketter now. A couple copies of Crackling Doom in hand. He is able to cast those.
But I don't think he really wants to do much with them right now. Unless he's willing to cast 1 this turn and 1 next turn to try to get the Jotty Offshoot off the table.
I don't love it.
If Eastwood goes land your turn, Ketter might do it.
Well, I suppose he doesn't have much better use for it.
Well, you can just save it for the large threats. No, you'd probably rather kill something with like World Breaker with it than a Jotty Offshoot. Just saying, if there's nothing else for Ketter to do with his mana, just for the sake of mana efficiency, you may consider it.
2 Crackling Dooms and Exquisite Firecraft, and it looks like a couple of lands right now in hand for Kent. The very difficult to answer Mantis Rider on the battlefield. There's another copy of Sylvan Advocate. And now here comes Crackling Doom. So that'll take care of that one. Ketter doing this in response to the first Sylvan Advocate, so the second one can't attack. And now we're going to head back Kent's way. He'll draw a card. I think he picked up another copy of Mantis Rider. And it looks like he has. So now it'll be 6 in the air.
There are some benefits to moving to just a 2-color build of this deck and cutting the plains out of the deck and just leaning on Kozilek's Return. What you're seeing right now is the cost. Eastwood's deck does not answer Mantis Rider very efficiently, and this is a card where you really need to answer it efficiently when it shows up.
Yeah, Mantis Rider's lifespan through Standard has been so interesting. We saw it everywhere, and then everyone said, you didn't cut this card. It stinks, you know. It just dies. You can't play this sort of card. And then Todd Anderson, of course, playing Jeskai Black without Mantis Rider, has been dominant on the SCG Tour without it. But now it looks like it might be in prime position to make a comeback.
I agree with the critique that it is a little bit undersized and a little underwhelming in the mid-range creature matchups. There are better things to do for 3 or 4 mana than casting Mantis Rider. But in the extremely fast matchups, it's one of the best threats in Standard. And in matchups like this, it is one of the best threats.
It is one of the last cards Aaron Eastwood wants to see show up.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So he plays a land and going to gain a life off the offshoot. He needs a big threat right now. And when you're playing against Green Red Eldrazi, you're just hoping they don't have something. Now here comes the Sylvan Advocate. There are 6 lands out there, so it's a little bit bigger. And all Eastwood can do is pass the turn back. So Ketter's going to sacrifice this Bloodstained Mire. We'll see what land he wants to dig out of his deck. I think it's got to be another source of red mana, and it is. It's a copy of Smoldering Marsh. He wants to be able to work himself in Exquisite Firecraft plus another red spell territory. And it picked up another copy of Mantis Rider. I think players just making sure life totals are in order here along with our table spotter. And there is a Wooded Foothills. Kent will sacrifice that. And again, I think it's another Source Red mana, and he might be able to just play another Mantis Rider and then Exquisite Firecraft this
Yeah,
turn.
this is a spot where there are some corner case cards that make what Ketter, how he wants to sequence his turn a little bit more complicated. Winds of Kalsizma is one of them, and Feed the Clan is the other, where you kind of want to take different routes. If it's a life gain spell, you want to get the other Mantis Rider out there, and if it's a Fog, you'd rather use your mana casting burn spells. If Eastwood has nothing, he's dead no matter what, but it's a little bit more complicated for Ketter than just casting his spells.
Well, after an attack there, 4-6, an Exquisite Firecraft and a Crackling Doom will make Ketter the winner of this match over Aaron Eastwood at 2-1. Jeskai Black takes care of Green Red Eldrazi, and this build of Jeskai Black that Ketter does have, I'm a fan.